I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us on this Monday, April the 1st. So that means I'm not really a jokester kind of guy. I don't get behind that. But so, I'm letting you know right now. I mean, I could do some radio joke or something like that. A lot of times radio shows are going to play jokes on you on April 1st. I've done it before. Yeah. This just in. All Lifeway stores, they are in fact not closing. April Fools. Oh, by the way, on the I'll tell you this. On that, we were, last week, I was watching the committee talk about this internet sales tax 2.0 they want to pass on you, the people. And, in doing this, they continued the other side. I saw the bad side. They keep telling you that this is going to somehow save small business owners on Main Street, and that it's because of that it needs to be considered an economic development project. And economic development is really code for spending your taxpayer dollars. That's what their version of economic development is. Not giving you more money in your pocket. That's real economic development. The government's definition of economic development is taking your tax dollars and spending it the way they see fit to try to create jobs. But that's their messaging, okay? Economic development. But the truth of the matter is, you could right now, in the name of economic development, again, their phony definition of it, start to pass a tax on your Netflix subscriptions or your Amazon Prime subscriptions in an effort to bring back brick-and-mortar Blockbuster video stores. No, I'm saying you could make the argument for it, right? This is about or what about Radio Shack or something like that? Like, this is about saving brick-and-mortar stores, right? So we need to tax Netflix downloads, or we need to tax your Netflix subscription so that we can bring back Hastings. Remember Hastings? Me and my wife were talking about Hastings the other day. Hastings was awesome. It was so cool. And they just kept, but people just weren't going to brick and mortar stores anymore to rent movies or really to buy books that much. So, there wasn't enough coffee in the world to save Hastings. All right, so the telephone number 870-275-9799. We do have a great show for you. We're going to dive back in the next hour. We're going to dive back into this nurse anesthetists situation. Going to be having some folks on the program who are familiar with this bill, where it is right now. I do believe they've gotten out of committee. Of course, this is one of those other, deregulation, attempting to give the people really, more choice is what it comes down to for me. But then, of course, you have the other doctors or the other professionals. You didn't go to the same school that I did. You didn't get you and it's just on and on and on and on and on. Yeah, when you start talking about changing the laws in regarding to different medical professions, all of a sudden the medical community doesn't get along as much as it should, right? So, case in point, we've already seen this with the optometry bill, and I think it's actually hilarious. So the optometrists get their bill to, deregulation so they can perform some procedures that optometrists are already trained to perform, and optometrists in other states do. The ophthalmologists, no, you didn't go to school for this. And they freak out, and they say some terrible, terrible, nasty things. Well, the Arkansas General Assembly actually stood up to the pressure, probably because there's really just a lot more optometrists in Arkansas than there are ophthalmologists. They outnumber them back in their districts, and who knows? There might be some optometrists out there that wouldn't mind funding primary challengers for some of these guys if you don't vote to deregulate their profession. And so the optometrists, they get their bill out of committee. They get it out of both chambers of the House. I believe the governor signed it, so the good job, Asa, for signing that. And so then the ophthalmologists, out of spite, they start supporting the bill that they didn't support that would allow opticians to sell contact lenses. Now, right now, as I understand it, optometrists and ophthalmologists are the only two people that can sell or dispense contact lenses. Well, so just to hurt the optometrists, the ophthalmologists now then supported a bill to deregulate opticians, so letting them be able to sell. And I'm like, wow, if we keep doing this, these professions, out of spite, might actually give us a little freedom back, right? Because I would support that bill. I would say, yeah, why can't opticians sell contact lenses? You know what I'm saying? So just out of spite, like the human condition, maybe we can somehow harness it and turn it against the tyrants to where we have more freedom, more choice, and everybody's happy. But that's just the way I look at things, I guess. Do you look at things like that? Tell me about it. 870-275-9799. It is Monday. It is we're in the day 78 or something of the Arkansas General Assembly. We're going to be following all of those bills. Grant Hodges, State Representative Grant Hodges. Sorry, that's interesting. State Representative Grant Hodges, he gave an amazing speech on the floor of the House on Friday. The House did meet on Friday, and the House voted down the appropriation for Medicaid expansion. Now, it only got 51 votes. It needed 75. I want to say right now, I think the Arkansas House of Representatives did the right thing in voting down that appropriation. At this point, especially what you guys were being asked to do, less than 48 hours, a judge struck down the Arkansas work requirement for Arkansas Works private option Medicaid expansion, Obamacare, whatever they want to call it, right? And they ram through it. They ram it through the Senate. They barely get enough votes through the Senate. And now I'm talking those 40 minutes. They voted on this appropriation 40 minutes before the judge released his ruling, and we're supposed to believe that that's just a coincidence? No, it leaked. Somehow the administration, the leadership knew that they were on the losing end of the Arkansas Works work requirement. And they got the people. If you're in the Senate and you voted for this thing, maybe you just really agree with the program still, but you really are going to say that the work requirement being struck is not a reason to pump the brakes a little bit and just get an answer to your questions? I mean, let's just remember this. You guys only have constitutional power once a year, maybe. Really, it's once every 2 years. Okay? And then it's up to the legislative council to rubber stamp whatever the executive wants. That's the truth. That's really how our state is run, right? People talk all the time about how, the governorship, he actually is very, very weak. I mean, he is in terms of, he is now when you are in session because he can veto something and all you guys have to do is come up with 51 votes in the House, 51%. And you can override anything. You can make any law you want with 51%, right? But you guys are only in session once every 2 years. So you see there is a balance there. There's very much a balance. So we've been talking about Medicaid expansion. There are plenty of conservatives out there who think that Medicaid expansion is terrible for this state. We can't afford it. But at least we have the work requirements. I'll go ahead and support it. Because you know what? We've already delivered this massive welfare program to so many people. They're addicted to it. It's more like the insurance companies are addicted to the free money that we're giving them for people that aren't even going to the doctor. They're still going to the emergency room, by the way. Arkansas Works private option is probably the biggest scam ever perpetuated on the people of Arkansas. Because everything they say about this program is not true. Okay, it is a giveaway program. You call it corporate welfare. The left are huge hypocrites on there. The Democrat Party, huge hypocrites. I mean, we know you want socialized medicine, but there was a time that you guys used to be against the corporate welfare for the oil industry, for example. Not anymore, right? Or at least you don't ever bring it up. If you brought it up, you'd be like, well, what about giving all this money away? Now, I know the private option probably wasn't your idea. You wanted fee-for-service. And at this point, State Representative Josh Miller has a bill, HB 1929, that would bring us back to fee-for-service, which is demonstrably cheaper at this point. Now, it cuts out Blue Cross Blue Shield and their $2 billion windfall, right? And whatever other companies out there that are benefiting from this program, private companies getting taxpayer money that then are expected to tithe a portion of that money back to a political action committee, a favored political action committee that then goes to support the people that continue this giant scam over and over and over and over again. People want to talk about health care. People want to talk about trying to take care of the working poor in this program. You don't care about taking care of the working poor. You care about Blue Cross Blue Shield getting $600 per month per person, regardless if they use the insurance policy and go to the doctor or not, at taxpayer expense. That's what we're talking about here. And everybody hated this program on the right, at least the base did. People lost elections left and right before the establishment started getting a lot more organized and realized that there was actually legitimate opposition out there that was, that were winning elections and going against their mother government goals. Okay? And now all of a sudden, we have the Arkansas work requirement that stop the presses. There's been as many as 330,000 people on the program. There was never supposed to be more than 215. And ASA, in defending the work requirement, the other day said, we've 12,000 people now have jobs and have been moved on to work because of the work requirement. 12,000 people. 12,000 people. Oh, man. That's a lot of money we're spending to justify 12,000 people. It's government 101, meaning it doesn't work the way they say it's going to work. It doesn't. It's a disaster. So the House of Representatives has a lot more common sense than the state agency that is the Arkansas Senate now. You're now a state agency, which congratulations, in my opinion. And that's because of family relations. What am I trying to say? Familia? Anyway, family relations, we'll just say that. Uncle, nephew. So the House has way more common sense. They're a lot more independent. And they look at this and they say, hang on, wait a second. You're asking us less than 48 hours since a judge has made a decision striking a key provision of this law, the Arkansas work requirement. You want us to go ahead and vote on the legislation and pass this giant budget? That doesn't make any sense. So State Representative Grant Hodges took to the floor in the most measured, factual speech and used Governor Asa Hutchinson's own talking points from years past against him. And it was masterfully done. Then State Representative Dan Sullivan came down and gave a great speech saying we need to have our questions answered. He even said, maybe we should pass this budget, but we should wait and get some answers and get some public assurances. You see, right now, let me tell you how Asa and the gang are trying to handle this little budget hiccup in the Arkansas House of Representatives right now. Because that's what everybody's talking about. You know, the left actually was upset. Wasn't it incredible to see John Brummett actually upset and going to his leftist class warfare demagoguery? Like, just, you know what I mean? Wasn't that refreshing? That's the way the left is supposed to behave every time Republicans do anything in this state, as far as I'm concerned, and yet we rarely see it. Right now, though, the establishment and the gang, if you will, they want to negotiate this process behind closed doors because they don't want the people to even think for a moment that the emperor has no clothes. He's walking around the Capitol, stark naked, but everybody is just pretending and saying, yes, Governor, the program is working swimmingly. 12,000 people have found jobs. We could afford it. We could afford the program that was only supposed to spend, we were only supposed to spend $50 million this year on it, in Arkansas' share of the program, and we're now spending $138 million this year, more than double your own estimates. But by the way, it's a brilliant new Hugo Boss suit that you're wearing when he's not wearing anything at all. That's what's going on down there. And so they're going to try to negotiate this so that nobody can actually see the facts and see how bad this program really, truly is. We couldn't afford it without the work requirements. I don't think we can afford it with the work requirements. Based on the information I just gave you, $50 million estimate, we spend $138 million. I mean, it's numbers, folks. We've never been able to afford this. Now that we're paying as much as 10%, or eventually going to be paying as much as 10%, all of the arguments about, well, if we don't spend that money, some other state will get it, even though that's a false argument. But all of the, they wanted a $2 billion windfall of federal money just infused into Arkansas. Okay? That's what this was about. Well, the financial incentives for the state are now gone because it's now no longer free money. It's now costing the Arkansas taxpayer money. Okay? Now, it's possible that the people in leadership are actually Bernie Sanders type, when it comes to socialized medicine, that they believe that we are born into this world responsible for one another's health care costs. I mean, that's what it means. I was listening to Bernie Sanders on the way into work. One of the news sites was talking about Bernie Sanders and his Medicare for All. And he says, we need to make health care a right. We got to make it a right. It's just something we got to do. And I'm thinking, health care a right. When I heard that, back kind of full circle back to the medical community, I don't believe doctors are my slaves. And I think if you believe health care is a right, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of going a few more steps. I'm just kind of gaming this out here. I don't have a right to a doctor's labor. They've gone to school. Remember? They've gone to school. They've gone to school. They have learned the information that I have not learned. And if I need their help, if I want their service, I have to pay for that service. Okay? That's the way it should work. You start throwing out healthcare as a right, well, all of a sudden, if you want to be a doctor, we might pay you well, I guess, but you're essentially a slave. Because all these people have a right, according to the government, to your knowledge that's in your head and to your skills. Surgeons are really protective of their hands, you know what I mean? Because it's all they got. You know what I mean? Yeah, the Marvel movie Doctor Strange, exactly right. They're very right. Well, I don't have a right to that. I have to pay for that. Excuse me. All right, we're going to take a break here. It's 23 after, almost 24 after the hour. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. Back in a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the program. Happy Friday to Scott Flippo. Senator Scott Flippo is on the program. Scott, how are you, sir?
Paul, I'm well. Thank you very much, and good morning to you and your listeners.
Yes.
Glad to be with you this morning.
Glad that you're with us. Remind the statewide audience, District 17 is where?
District 17, North Central Arkansas, and that covers the majority of Baxter, Marion, and Boone County.
There we go. That's a big district.
So in my opinion,
and one of my favorite parts of the state. One of my favorite parts of the state as well. So
absolutely.
So Scott, I want to talk about this amazing gun resolution, but before we do that, I do want to ask you about your vote, for the internet sales tax bill that came up this week.
Paul.
I know. I got to go there. Tell us about it.
Okay, so first of all, it's not the internet sales tax, it's the e-fairness bill, Paul. It's going to call it something.
Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language. The purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields two beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office. And second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their healthcare more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate healthcare, nothing will change for them.
Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in, dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist healthcare program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
There is a thread. I found this on Friday after the program was over. A guy by the name of Yasser Ali, who is he's a writer, I think, for like New Yorker magazine. Let me see if this will come up. Yeah, New York Magazine, Huffington Post contributor. And so he talks about how he received a call from Daphne Linzer. Okay, Daphne Linzer, who is the managing editor for politics for NBC News and MSNBC. He says, Yasser Ali here says, Daphne's conduct during the call was highly inappropriate and unethical. So what was the purpose of the call? And you've got to check this thread out because this is absolutely confirms everything that we say about coordination media bias. And here we have someone who's probably on the left calling out something that happened to him where the NBC reporter is trying to get Yasser to kill a story, very, very small story, on behalf of the Democratic National Committee. They didn't want it released yet. The Democrat National Committee was basically using, or the NBC reporter was essentially repping the Democrat National Committee. And Yasser goes on in this thread to just describe how absolutely appalling it was to have a news reporter be basically stumping for the political considerations of the Democrat National Committee. Anyway, you need to check it out. Matter of fact, we may revisit some of this because it's a very detailed Twitter thread where he really calls them out. Back in just a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the program. Happy Friday to Scott Flippo. Senator Scott Flippo is on the program. Scott, how are you, sir?
Paul, I'm well. Thank you very much, and good morning to you and your listeners.
Yes.
To be with you this morning.
Glad that you're with us. Remind the statewide audience, District 17 is where?
District 17, North Central Arkansas, and that covers the majority of Baxter, Marion, and Boone County.
There we go. That's a big district.
So in my opinion,
and one of my favorite parts of the state. One of my favorite parts of the state as well. So
absolutely.
So Scott, I want to talk about this amazing gun resolution, but before we do that, I do want to ask you about your vote, for the internet sales tax bill that came up this week.
Paul.
I know. I got to go there. Tell us about
it. Okay. So first of all, it's not the internet sales tax. It's the e-fairness bill, Paul. If you're going to call it something, get the name right. It's the e-fairness.
Well,
e-fairness bill.
Okay, so e-fairness. Okay, so tell us about it. It is a bill that's got a lot of stuff packed into it.
Down here in Little Rock, it's always about fairness.
Yeah.
So the internet sales tax. So that was a difficult vote to make. Ideally, I like to see tax cuts on their own because there was a corporate income tax that was wrapped in there with it.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that we do here in Little Rock is, they'll take an increase somewhere and they'll lump it in with a tax cut, and which makes it difficult to vote against. Obviously, the Supreme Court ruled last year that states could collect, the sales tax on online purchases. I believe it was at $10,000 or more a year for a business. I want to say that was it, Paul.
I think you're right. Something in there.
That sounds right. And here's the thing. The messaging and the strategy behind this was, it's all about e-fairness. But what I think a lot of people fail to realize is that, this is not going to save Main Street business in and of itself. People's shopping habits are changing. The way they purchase things are changing. I'm 39 years old. A lot of people my age and younger, they'll shop online for the convenience factor. So is this going to be the silver bullet that's going to save, small Main Street business? I don't think it will be. Mm-hmm. But certainly that's one of the messaging parts behind it. But I would like to see that we're going to vote on things on their own and not lump it in together to try to make it easier.
But you would say down here. You would say the corporate tax provisions are kind of what got your yes vote?
Oh, absolutely. That's a difficult thing to vote against. I mean, Arkansas needs to be more competitive with our corporate tax rate. But again, we're going to lump that in with something else, which always makes it difficult. I want to say that measure got 27.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us. Man, I tell you this much right now, the stuff that's going on the border, there are more and more people, I think, coming around to the realization that what's going on at the border is a crisis. It is a national emergency, and they keep saying, and there's just more and more caravans. You have, let's see here, Mike Mulvaney saying that migrants and Democrats are shutting down the border, meaning they're just overwhelming the system. Then you have this other story here where you have the Trump administration saying that we're going to cut off all foreign aid to governments like Guatemala. We've never seen anything like this. Trump threatens to close the border entirely. Migrants are overwhelming the Texas cities to the south of us right now. Yeah, here it is. Here's the Reuters article. Trump cuts aid to Central American countries as migrant crisis deepens. Now, again, what's the reason for this mass migration into our country? Obviously, we've got a lot of resources. We don't have an infinite amount of resources. That's something that we need to talk about. The economic realities of taking in all of these people, if we were to just let them in, would actually hurt our country, economically speaking. Matter of fact, you can't even argue with that. It's the truth. Now, where are these people coming from, right? You have the Mexican government. I was listening to Senator Lindsey Graham yesterday, and he says you have the Mexican government that actually is busing these people towards the border and then dropping them off and then going back and picking up more people. Now, of course, you can't even bring up George Soros' name in all of this, because if you do, remember, somehow they successfully used the media to get anyone who brings up George Soros funding any of this is anti-Semite now. Okay, yeah, the people on the right, very conservative, very pro-Israel, not anti-Semites. Those are the people on the left, actually. But they somehow got the media to suggest that if you criticize or even suggest that there's some sort of James Bond-type villain, some sort of global elite that's actually funding this immigration crisis, that you're now an anti-Semite. Okay, got it. Yeah, sure. Right. Now, we also have a situation where every other major country in the world is experiencing the same problem at the border. Now, think about that for a second. There's nothing to see here, right? If every other country... I was talking with a friend, who this is several weeks ago, and this friend told me, he doesn't think there's any kind of coordination, that it's all economics, okay? That it's all economics, and you had these economic bubbles, and they busted, and now these people need to go somewhere, or you had war, like in the Middle East, and they're displaced, and people are like, okay, well, can we control economics? Is there a way? Are there people at the global levels of this government or this all these different associations and things like that believe they can control economics the way you control the temperature in your house? The Federal Reserve believes that. They believe that with the interest rate, they can just set the temperature to 72 degrees in their house or 70 degrees or whatever. They believe they can control, they can manipulate. By the way, the minimum wage is a part of that corrupt system, by the way. They certainly believe that they can. I'm just trying to say if there are people out there who don't really believe that there is some sort of coordination here, I'm just suggesting that it's very possible, because the more complicated something is, the more complicated an economic system is, the smaller the group of people that really understand how to get things done, to manipulate it, and the more opportunity there is for corruption that you would never even know about. Now, I'm not even going to bring up the war part in a serious way, because obviously we control wars, right? Obviously we can control who has guns and who's going to fight with one another, and that's going to obviously displace massive amounts of people. Now, take into effect that over in Europe, a lot of these displaced refugees are military-aged men. That's not by design, though, right? There's clearly no effort, no global effort to set up Muslim no-go zones like you have in Great Britain. What's the Yellow Vest protest? What are the Yellow Vest protesters really protesting? They want their sovereignty back. They want the border to mean something. What is Brexit about? Brexit is about being a part, this will sound familiar, Arkansas. Brexit is about being a part of a massive government that takes your money and sends it back to you with strings attached. The European Union, right? We're going to take all of Britain's money because they're pretty prosperous. Then we're going to give it back to them, and then we're going to tell them how they have to spend it because they're a part of the EU. All over the world, you have people who are standing up for their country because they want borders to represent ideas again. Why did Donald Trump, one of the reasons Donald Trump got into power, he built the coalition he did, is because of his trade policies. And I'm telling you, that was amazing to me. Trade wasn't even on my radar, but you would not believe how many people really knew how bad NAFTA was. Okay? I mean, at least that's what they're convinced of. And he also did it by saying, listen, illegal immigration is wrong. We should not welcome it. We should not incentivize it. We need to build a wall. Again, why? Because the president is saying, and the American people are saying, we want borders to represent ideas again. This is where your idea ends, and this is where our awesome American idea begins. Same goes for France. The same goes for these. You've got the same thing going up with the Norwegian countries, and the same thing goes for the United Kingdom. And, of course, what's going to happen when they don't do the Brexit? I don't know. I honestly don't know what you would do. What would you do if you voted overwhelmingly and the government basically just gave you excuse after excuse after excuse because the powerful elite just refuse the will of the people? I mean, what's going on right now with Brexit and their unwillingness to give the people what they voted for is very, very similar to the FISA scandal and the email situation. The FISA warrant, the Clinton, the Obama spying on the Trump campaign, a 2-year investigation of Russia collusion. What is that for? It's all an effort to thwart giving the people what they voted for, which is a president like Donald Trump. That's what the whole thing is. I bet you, I think he will shut down the border. Now, what does that look like? I'm amazed that there's not more coverage of what the military is actually doing down at the border. You don't really see, you see photos of the migrants tearing down fences and things like that. But, I was listening to President Trump on his interview with Sean Hannity. I think he did like the entire hour of the Hannity show last week. I'm sure many of you saw it. And he talked about how the military's doing a good job putting up barriers of like barbed wire and stuff on the ground where there is no wall yet. Where are those photos? I mean, I haven't seen them. And I actually think those photos would poll very well if people actually saw our boys, our young men in uniform down there, putting up barbed wire and stuff. I think a lot of people would be like, you know what, it's about time. It's about time because this is ridiculous. This is just ridiculous. Telephone number 870-275-9799. Let's go ahead, Joe, if you don't mind. I would like to play State Representative Grant Hodges' speech from Friday. This was very controversial. The House of Representatives in Arkansas decided to vote down the appropriation for the Arkansas Works Medicaid expansion because, well, you know what? Why did they do it? Why did they only get 51 votes when they needed 75? Well, I think it has a lot to do with what Grant Hodges said. State Representative Grant Hodges made some excellent points and actually used Governor Asa Hutchinson's previous messaging against him in terms of pointing out, listen, we need to wait because the work requirement has now been struck down by a federal judge, and you're asking us less than 48 hours to go ahead and vote for the massive spending? That's not right. And he's right. He's exactly correct. It isn't right to do that. Well, again, we have Republicans that just have no problem putting other Republicans in terrible, terrible legislative situations. Here's State Representative Grant Hodges from Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I didn't want to come down to the well today, but I felt like I had to, and I told Speaker Shepard and Chairman Jean in advance that I would if this bill was run today. And so that's what I'm doing. My issue really is that we're being asked to vote on a more than $8 billion Medicaid budget less than 48 hours after a court decision that has a pretty significant effect on the Medicaid budget. And I cannot support that. Last night, as I was kind of stewing about the fact that this bill was going to be run today with such short notice, I decided to go back and look at what was said when we ran the same appropriation a year and 2 years ago, just to see what we were told, because this is my fifth session, and those of you that have been around, they all sort of blur together, and you just kind of forget all the specifics. So I wanted to go back and hear what was said about this a year ago and 2 years ago. And also I know that almost a fourth of you weren't here a year and 2 years ago. And so for one thing, like I mentioned in my question to Chairman Gene, I went back and watched him present the bill 2 years ago, and he said in there that we can't sustain this budget as is if we don't do something. In addition, I went back and looked at what the governor had said, and I went through a lot of his press releases. And I want to talk about a few things he said last year when we ran this budget in the fiscal session. And the first one is from February in his State of the State address before the fiscal session started last year. He said, and I quote, "As for the future, I expect approval from Washington before the legislative session ends on our request to implement a work requirement for the Arkansas Works program. If you are able-bodied and of working age with no dependents, you should be working or in training. The only long-lasting solution to lowering the cost of Medicaid is to help more people earn their way off. The only long-lasting solution to lowering the cost of Medicaid is to help more people earn their way off." So my question is, if this is no longer a solution because we no longer have the work requirement, are there other solutions that we can consider before we vote for this appropriation? Because I know there's at least one representative who has a bill to help lower the cost of Medicaid, specifically for the expansion population that we're really all talking about here. Could we not discuss some of that before we vote on this bill? The next statement was on March 6th, a few weeks later. It was a press release that said, "Governor Hutchinson issues statement in response to the passage of Senate Bill 30, the Division of Medical Services appropriation," same appropriation as we have here today. This was last year. Quote, "I'm very grateful for the senators that were able to support Arkansas Works and the DHS appropriation. Obviously, the work requirement was a significant factor in showing the reform that we're accomplishing, and I appreciate the Senate's leadership in passing this on the first vote. Obviously, the work requirement was a significant factor." A few days later, and this will be the last one, a press release titled "Turning Point for Healthcare in Arkansas." The governor said, "The work requirement is not intended as a punishment, but as a way for Arkansans to actively engage in their community and to enjoy the dignity that comes with earning a paycheck and providing for a family. The fact is, we would not have been able to sustain Medicaid without the type of reform included in the waiver. We needed the flexibility to best address the needs of Arkansas, and that is what this waiver allows. The fact is, we would not have been able to sustain Medicaid without the type of reform included in the waiver."
Listen to that.
Which, as of today, as we're voting on this bill, we do not have. So my question is that statement true? If it's true that we can't sustain Medicaid without this waiver, then aren't we being asked today to vote for an appropriation for an unsustainable Medicaid program? It seems to follow up to me. So really, I'm going to end with a lot of questions that I came up last night as I watched what I was told over the last 2 years about this same appropriation. My first question was, why was this appropriation passed out of budget during a recess from our session on Tuesday? I talked to several members who didn't even realize that had happened, but this bill was passed out of joint budget on Tuesday afternoon. Why was it then passed out of the Senate with a minimum of 27 votes just minutes before the district court's decision was released on Wednesday? According to the legislature's website, that bill passed out at 3:36 p.m., and our AP reporter, Andrew DeMillo, tweeted at 4:03 p.m. that the work requirement was struck down. So less than 30 minutes before we get the decision, the Senate passed the bill. Why was this appropriation then put before the House for a final vote less than 48 hours after the court's decision? I got text about this about 4 o'clock 2 days ago. It's less than 48 hours, and now we're being asked to make an $8 billion decision. Why is this appropriation not being amended at all now that the work requirement piece is out of it? This appropriation was filed when the work requirement was in effect, and it has not been amended since. Does the work requirement not affect the Medicaid budget? Either the work requirement has no effect, which Chairman Gene said it has about a $20 million effect by his calculation, or the appropriation bill is intentionally inflated for DHS. And I listened to the Senate debate, and Senator Teague, the Senate budget chairman, said that there's plenty of appropriation either way. And Chairman Gene said a similar thing today. So then that begs the question to me, what is the point of this appropriation at all if DHS can just do whatever they want anyway? Why do we even bother with the appropriation if DHS and the executive branch can just do whatever they want anyway? Does the governor still hold his prior positions that the work requirement is the only long-lasting solution for lowering the cost of Medicaid? That it was a significant factor in passing this appropriation last year, and that the Medicaid program is unsustainable without it? And lastly, since we currently don't know if this case will be appealed, because just to clarify, the federal government is the defendant in this case, not the state of Arkansas. So this is not Attorney General Leslie Rutledge's decision to appeal this case or not. That is a federal government decision, which, as we're being asked to vote on this bill today, we have no indication that it for sure will be appealed. What if the case isn't appealed? Can we at least wait to pass this appropriation until after we know that it will be appealed? If it is appealed, how long was that going to take to resolve? Could it take years? Is it going to go to the Supreme Court? What happens to Medicaid between now and then? I think the House deserves to have our questions answered, to be given adequate time to consider the ramifications of the court's decision and the path forward, and to be included as a co-equal in these decisions rather than being run over with an $8 billion decision in less than 48 hours. With that, I would appreciate a no vote on this appropriation.
That's State Representative Grant Hodges, again, doing an excellent job of opposing questions, and he even used the governor's own statements of the past, meaning we cannot fiscally sustain Medicaid without the waiver, i.e. the work requirement that the federal government gave to Arkansas, meaning we cannot do this. And now we don't have the waiver. So Grant Hodges is publicly asking, does the governor still stand by that statement that this is unsustainable without the waiver? Does he? He's saying that we need to, obviously, he wants to push this budget through. He doesn't want to rehash these old arguments. If at this point, if you don't really know, if you're a legislator especially, if you don't really know what Arkansas Works is, it's because you don't want to know. If you don't know what Medicaid expansion Obamacare is, it's because you don't want to know. See, I mean, what are we, 6 years is 6 years? Yeah. This program has been around for 6 years, and the reporting that you hear from Conduit News has been 100% accurate on this particular subject. I mean, and not to mention from a conservative philosophy as well, in terms of in terms of having a worldview and an understanding of what government will do, what it can't do. This program confirms my worldview as a limited government conservative all the time. Not to mention the windfall that goes to Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I'm going to play that speech again later in the program. I'm also going to play State Representative Dan Sullivan, because Dan Sullivan is arguing that we need to have a committee of the whole where everybody comes together and talks about this publicly. I do believe that this is eventually going to be passed. I think they're going to pass the appropriation. I really do. I don't think they should, but I think they will. I think it's 100% reasonable, though, to get answers to the questions that Grant Hodges was asking, and to get public statements and public commitments about what we do moving forward. You're not going to have a situation where they just end the program overnight. I don't believe we're to that point yet. We'll be to that point when the people just have had enough and they're tired of having their gas taxes raised and their internet taxes raised and everything else to pay for this nonsense. We're not quite there yet. But they do need public assurances, public perceptions, and we've also got to, if you're going to get rid of it, it would have to be something gradual. There's no question it would have to be something done that's a gradual process. Or you could do what Josh Miller is doing, which he has a gradual approach to slowly shift all of this into traditional Medicaid fee-for-service, which is demonstrably cheaper at this point. We're going to take a break. Back in a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Votes in the Senate, 27-28. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think that it did get 27, yeah.
I let him go past my name the first time. I put my thumb at the end. A difficult vote, but I made it, and I'm going to stand by it.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I don't want, we're at a point now, and just kind of address this if you don't mind. My fear is after this session is over, there's a lot of money that's going to be coming from the people to the government than before you guys met. Are you worried at all about that?
Yeah. I think that's a true statement, Paul. I don't think it. I know it.
You know it. So, that's what's so frustrating here. And we have this situation where Arkansas Works yesterday, the work requirements, struck down by a federal judge. Now, let me ask you this, Scott, because do you think it was a coincidence that, and now you didn't vote for the funding on that.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Your comments on the Facebook page, or broadcasting over at YouTube and facebook.com/Conduit News, your comments over this YouTube page are pretty funny. My favorite one so far that I read during the break is "Make Blue Cross Blue Shield great again." I feel like that's pretty funny. Folks, that's all the time we have for the first hour. Be sure to, if you're listening on podcast, be sure to go over and listen to hour 2. We'll be talking with some great Arkansas healthcare professionals from the nurse anesthetist community. We'll be talking about this bill that we have mentioned before, where it is, and this is a bill, again, to deregulate, the healthcare industry, the licensing. People forget we have more licensing, more regulations when it comes to, the state of Arkansas. More licensing boards in the state of New York, actually. A lot of people don't understand that. But we'll talk more about this bill. If it's some more freedom, more choice, I'm all for it. And don't go anywhere. We'll be back here in just a moment. Happy Monday.
Talk of Northeast Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Yesterday, and that's a great vote. And you're being very consistent there in your opposition to it. But do you think that it was a coincidence that you guys pushed the funding for Arkansas Works through like an hour and a half before the judge comes down with his ruling?
Yes. It is not a coincidence. I do not believe in coincidences in politics. And so that was, well calculated on our part down here. And I don't think it was even an hour and a half. I think it was about 30 minutes before the judge came down with his ruling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
I think before we got out of session yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I saw online where the judge had overturned their work requirements.
Yeah, and I know
so there was a mad rush to get that. Of course, it would have been difficult for them to extend or pass the appropriations for Arkansas Works last year without those work requirements.
Mm-hmm.
But with any government program, Paul, and you and your listeners are probably aware of this, once you expand or create a new social program, it's almost always impossible to do away with it. And Arkansas Works, private option, is no different.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And my concern is, Scott, I don't think we can afford – I know we can't afford Obamacare Medicaid expansion without the work requirements. I don't think we can afford it with the work requirements personally.
No, I didn't vote for it with the work requirements. I think what would have tipped the scales for me had been had we gone along and the feds approved the waiver to allow us to reduce eligibility from 130% to 100% of federal poverty line. That would have really reined it in, and I think made it more manageable, more so than just the work requirements on their own. As I understood it, the feds were not really open. The Trump administration was not really open to that for fear that a lot of states that didn't expand Medicaid would want to come on board and expand it under those conditions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But either way, it's just a boondoggle. I was telling somebody last night. The good news is at least we have this free wraparound dental coverage for people on Arkansas Works to encourage them to be good stewards of their already free insurance.
I'm forgetting about the wraparound coverage. Okay. About to say, I thought you were being sarcastic there. Yeah, because that's not good news.
No,
we're talking with.
This is ridiculous. We're giving people free wraparound dental coverage to be a good steward of their already free insurance. Think about that.
Yeah, and it's.
I don't even have dental insurance.
Hey, State Representative Josh Miller actually has a bill. I think it's House Bill 1929
to move it all to Medicaid, traditional Medicaid.
Yeah, at this point, it's demonstrably cheaper to do that.
Yeah, you bet. I like that.
To me, that's a solution moving forward. I know the governor yesterday said, no, we're going to stick with these work requirements and stick with giving Blue Cross Blue Shield $600 a month per person, But honestly, at this point, financially speaking, it makes way more sense to just keep expanded Medicaid and do it fee-for-service into the traditional pool because it's way cheaper. We're talking with Senator Scott Flippo. Now, let's talk about this week. Now, this was a big deal, a much bigger deal. I know everyone talks about how a resolution is non-binding, but the reason this was such a big deal is for 5 years, grassroots activists, Scott, have been saying that Arkansas is a constitutional carry state, that you don't need a permit to carry open or concealed, and you decided to run a resolution in the Senate clarifying a circuit court decision. Tell us about that.
So I visited with Representative Brant Smith out of Jonesboro a few months ago, and I told him, I said, listen, if you have if you want to move forward with this resolution and you have trouble with a Senate sponsor, you call me and let me know, and I'll be more than happy to run it for you. So 2 or 3 weeks later, Brant calls me and asked me if I would be willing to run it in the Senate. I said, of course. Here's the thing, Paul. Rights are important. Exercising those rights are important because if you do not exercise your rights, you lose your rights. Not everybody in Arkansas is going to open carry. The vast majority are not. However, it is important for people to know that we are a constitutional carry state, which means you have the right to carry open or concealed without a permit. And there has been a lot of confusion over that. We have been an open carry state for a number of years now. The problem is that there's still, a lot of pockets of our state and a lot of folks, in law enforcement and other areas of government that don't understand.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. And a couple of weeks ago, we were talking with Dr. Cassandra Massey, who was on this program. We were following bills and how it's going to affect the nurse anesthetist community, I believe. And I want to introduce you. We've got Mr. Art Wolover. Is with us. Mr. Wolover, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Now, we also have Ann Cousins is on the line. Ann, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now, Ann, tell us who you are.
Hi, good morning. Yes, my name is Dr. Ann Phillips Cousins. I'm also a certified registered nurse anesthetist practicing here in Arkansas.
Okay. Now, Art, you're the president of the Arkansas Association of Nurse Anesthetists.
That's right.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. So tell us about this bill, SB 184.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
This is the bill that changes the language in the Nurse Practice Act. Right now, we're required to operate under the supervision of a physician or dentist. The language changes that and substitutes coordination for supervision, so that the legal liability for surgeons who would be forced to supervise us now changed so that it indicates that we're working together rather that they are supervising us. So it has made its way through the legislature thus far, and the final step is to have it heard on the floor of the House today and hopefully passing and then going to the governor's desk.
Okay. Ann, were you following that? I mean, I was. Sounds like it's a good deal. Sounds like people need to vote for this thing.
Absolutely. It doesn't change patient care. It actually is a law that's going to reflect how we currently practice. If you think about it logically, how could somebody that's not an anesthesiologist or nurse anesthetist supervise an anesthetic? It's impossible for a dentist who can't step into my role and administer an anesthetic, or an OBGYN who can step into my role and administer an anesthetic to, quote, supervise or be in charge of an anesthetic. So this is a bill that's really going to reflect how we practice every day.
So let's go back to Art here. Art, there's obviously pushback, right? I mean, if you're gonna listen to people out there who are going to say the sky's falling if you allow nurse anesthetists to do this, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We're getting a great deal of that from, both the Arkansas Medical Society and the Society of Anesthesiologists. And quite honestly, it's not about anesthesiologists and CRNAs working together. It's more about CRNAs working with surgeons, working in GI clinics, working in plastic surgery offices, and in rural areas where CRNAs are giving essentially 100% of the anesthetics already. Because we're not particularly well known among people other than healthcare providers, there's this idea that somehow this is something brand new and radical, and in fact, CRNAs have been around for 150 years. So this is just a way of bringing practice in the rural areas in coordination and congruence with the law as it is. The law just hasn't kept up.
It was the wrong cough button there. I've muted yours, Art. Anyway, hey, Ann. So it's kind of what Art was saying. Can you talk a little bit about some of the opposition to this? You know, I mean, it really kind of is a Chicken Little situation.
Sure. So, the two parties that Art mentioned are really taking advantage of the ignorance of the majority of people. When you ask anybody, who do you want to give your anesthesia, or we'll back up. If you ask most people who provides anesthesia, who administers anesthesia, people automatically think anesthesiologist because people are very unfamiliar with the role of a nurse anesthetist. I go and I can pre-op a patient on the floor. A nurse will introduce me and say, "Oh, this is your anesthesiologist coming in today." I never say I'm an anesthesiologist. I always make it very clear I'm a nurse anesthetist. But even people in the healthcare profession are unfamiliar with my role. And so it's very upsetting that our role, our education, our level of expertise is being perverted and undermined purposely by other parties. Furthermore, the medical society agreed that they came to the Arkansas Association of Nurse Anesthetists and agreed that removing the language in supervision or under the supervision and changing it to in coordination with a physician, dentist, somebody else lawfully permitted to provide or order an anesthetic was appropriate. So they said that was fine. But what they wanted to add was that if an anesthesiologist was present, they wanted to mandate law that Arkansas law say that they had to supervise. So for me, this reads, we know this isn't going to impact patient care, the language in coordination with. We're still working with our physicians, dentists, podiatrists. However, they wanted to alter the bill only for self-serving purposes for job security. And honestly, this isn't going to affect their jobs. There are anesthesiologists practicing all over this country, and nowhere in this country are nurse anesthetists required to be supervised by an anesthesiologist.
That was my next question, Art. So other states, you guys have this freedom in other states.
The only state that I'm aware of where an anesthesiologist is required to supervise a CRNA is the state of New Jersey, and that was just a recent development. In 40 states in the Nurse Practice Acts, there's no mention of supervision by anyone for a nurse anesthetist. Mm-hmm. You have to understand, too, that nurse anesthetists are, at this point, masters prepared, and by 2022, all schools of nurse anesthesia will be preparing graduates at the doctoral level.
Yeah.
So we are nurses, but we are advanced practice nurses with a great deal of education.
So, will somebody tell me, in terms of the process, I thought I heard this bill in a House committee. Was there ever a House version of this bill, or has it always been the Senate version, I guess is my question.
There is. Senator Stubblefield has introduced our bill in past sessions and introduced it again in this session. Representative Gonzalez also had a bill that was similar but not the same, and not one that had been requested by our association.
Okay.
So we went with the Senate bill. Senator Gonzalez has put his on deferred status and does not have an intention to run it. So the bill we're talking about, even though it is passed out of the House committee and going to the House floor, is the Senate bill.
Okay. So it's already made it past the Senate side. So then today's a pretty big deal. I guess my other question is, you mentioned the medical society, and the last time I had Dr. Massey on the program, and I brought up the fact that there was a letter that was sent. I believe it had UAMS heading on it, and it was very misleading, but it was given to the committee. And then it was found out that it was not authorized by the heart. I don't know if it was the Heart Hospital or UAMS. I can't really remember, but it wasn't authorized by the people, and it was misleading, if not just outright deceptive. And a lot of times when that happens, that'll push the committee the other way. But that was in the House side, right? So did that come into play on the Senate side at all?
Not at all. The Senate discussion and testimony that was given was difficult as well, with some of the similar charges or allegations being made about nurse anesthesia practice, but that did not come up until actually on the House side of testimony, and it was an allegation by a UAMS surgeon on UAMS letterhead that unsupervised CRNAs were causing increased injury and deaths to patients at the heart hospital, which was not at all the case, and the heart hospital quickly responded to that effect. And UAMS basically said that she shouldn't have done that on our letterhead, but there was never a real retraction of saying, no, this was wrong, when in fact it was wrong.
What about you, Dr. Ann Cousins? Do you think we've kind of gotten down to the truth of the matter?
Clearly. It shows how desperate they are that they can't even find factual evidence to make an argument, that they've resorted to lies and getting their peers and colleagues to feed into those lies. It disgusts me. I'm part of the medical, realm. My job is to take care of patients, to make sure patients get the best care by honest, intelligent, hardworking people, and I'm thoroughly disgusted by the lies that have been spread in this state.
Well, I'm glad that, at least it looks like things are, we've kind of got to the bottom of, what's true, what's not. But we would expect on the floor of the House today to probably hear some similar arguments to the negative, maybe not citing a, debunked UAMS letter. What do you think, Art?
That's true. There are 4 or 5 physicians who are elected members of the House of Representatives who will.
They make sure that they make sure that everybody knows they're a physician. Trust me.
Well, they will, as I understand it, be speaking against the bill. We have several supporters, strong supporters, who will be speaking for the bill. So we're looking for some interesting debate. We hope, and we've always tried to play this on the level and provide the facts to the legislators. There are studies out there that prove our safety and the fact that lack of supervision does not change patient safety. Patients do equally well with CRNAs. The problem is a larger level of the politics involved. I work with a group of anesthesiologists and CRNAs, and we work well together for the most part. I've also worked in small rural hospitals here in Arkansas where I'm one of the only CRNA providers. So I've worked in a number of settings, and usually, for the most part, on the local level, we work well together in spite of whatever politics is going on the state or national level.
Well, it's because it's about the patient. We're talking with Art Wolover. He's the president of the
the Arkansas Association of Nurse Anesthetists.
Yeah, so he's a nurse anesthetist. And then we have Dr. Ann Cousins. Now, most of the time, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're going in for a procedure, how often are you being put under by an anesthesiologist versus a nurse anesthetist?
75% of the time in the state of Arkansas, your anesthesia is administered by a nurse anesthetist. In the country, the average is higher. It's about 90% of the anesthetics administered to patients across this country are administered by a nurse anesthetist.
Well, there you go.
And in rural hospitals, critical access hospital, it's 100% of the time.
Wow.
Exactly. And I've heard really incorrect statements that I wanted to address, saying that this isn't going to change access to care and this doesn't help the state of Arkansas or its patients financially. And I have a unique experience. I've worked in every kind of anesthesia model we use in Arkansas, and I can give you 2 examples of how this will benefit Arkansans. I'd like to start with the access to care. So I have worked at a facility where from 7 to 3 p.m. there's an anesthesiologist on staff. This anesthesiologist is the only anesthesiologist in the facility, and they are hired because there are certain surgeons that do not want to take on the extra responsibility of supervising a CRNA, which I completely understand. They don't know how to give anesthesia if they don't want to supervise it. But what happens, even though we have anesthesia coverage 24/7, 365 days a year by a nurse anesthetist, they stop offering their services to patients around 3 o'clock. So we have surgeons work until 4, 5, 6, 7, however long they need to work to make sure patients are getting the care that they need. So somebody prematurely stopping their services because they're going to have to supervise is one very specific example of how access to care could be improved if Senate Bill 184 passes. Furthermore, I've worked at a facility, and I thought this was isolated to this facility, but after speaking with several nurse anesthetists, it's not. It's happening all over our state. Surgeons are being paid an inconvenience fee for supervising. So they can't bill for this. It's being paid by the hospital. And, you know, quite frankly, that money should and could go to improving patient care. Surgeons should not be receiving an inconvenience fee for supervising something they technically can't even supervise because they can't administer anesthesia.
Right.
And when surgeons are supervising, they're actually performing their own procedure on a patient. So people need to realize that, too. So if, let's say, a urologist is supervising me, are they? Or are they doing their own case? Right? This isn't changing how we practice. This is, again, reflecting exactly how we practice. And I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I want a law that I can actually abide.
That's a really good point. This is a really good point. So do you kind of see this kind of bringing the law into what's already happening in a way?
That's correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's exactly the right analysis. This is what's going on. And people have to recognize that this law is not going to mandate any changes at the local level. In other words, hospitals are the final deciders through credentialing of who gets to practice there and how they practice. So even though the word supervision is substituted by coordination and supervision is no longer required and the surgeon doesn't have that legal liability involved, the hospital where the CRNAs and surgeons and anesthesiologists are working make the decision on how things function, how teams run or don't run, and who actually gets to practice there. So what this gives them is the freedom at the local level to be able to decide how best to serve their patients, how economically to do it, and what the best mix of providers would be for their local situation.
Dr. Cousins, when this is all said and done, I mean, however it shakes out, are the anesthesiologists and the nurse anesthetists gonna get along again?
Yeah, we've been getting along for years. We've never had to work with an anesthesiologist. We do. We're colleagues. You know, we are professionals, hopefully. I mean, does it put a bad taste in providers' mouth? Absolutely, when you have somebody running around with blatant lies. But you know what? I can put my ego aside when I'm at work, and I take care of patients. That's what I was educated to do. That's what my passion is for, and that's what I'll continue to do for our Kansans. I'll continue to give you the best, safest care that I possibly can, along with my fellow CRNA peers.
And Art Wolover, let's give you, as president of the Arkansas Association of Nurse Anesthetists, let's give you the last word on this. The vote's going to probably be sometime today on the House floor.
It should be this afternoon. They convene about 1:30. The problem has been, I've been doing this for 37 years. I've seen these cycles in the mid-'80s when Medicare decided that they were going to pay CRNAs directly as the first non-physician providers that got paid. The same battle occurred on the national level when healthcare wanted to remove supervision on the national level from regs, and almost happened in the Clinton administration and then fell apart because it was put on hold, and then we came up with a different plan. So supervision on the national level is still in place, but the possibility is using what's called the opt-out to remove that on the state level. 17 states have done that so far, and that means it reduces the administrative burden on hospitals, on physicians, and on other providers. So that if this happens, if SB 184 passes today in Arkansas House and the governor signs it, that would be a possibility as a step for freeing up hospitals and providers from some of the federal regulations that people struggle with on a day-to-day basis. So we're encouraging everyone we've talked to be supportive of this bill. It's nothing new as far as practice or procedure is concerned. We've been here a long time. We'll continue to be here for the patients. We love doing what we do. We just want the ability to do it on a level playing field and let the local markets decide how best to serve the patients.
Absolutely. Art Wolover, it's great to meet you, sir, have you in studio. And Dr. Cousins, thanks so much for calling in this morning.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
All righty.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Paul.
Folks, we'll have a video of this at conduitnews.com. If you want to check this out, share it with your friends later. And this is part of our continuing coverage of the 92nd General Assembly. It's Conduit News Radio. Back in just a moment.
that or realize that yet. So we need to educate people. And so last year there was an appeals court ruling. I believe it was Taft versus Arkansas. Taft?
Yeah, Taft. Yeah.
Taft versus Arkansas. And what the appeals court ruled was that essentially they just clarified that indeed we are a constitutional carry state, and you do have the right to carry openly or concealed without a permit. Now, this resolution is just showing that this General Assembly concurs with that ruling. We are in agreement. The governor has already come out and said we're an open carry state. The Attorney General has come out and said we're an open carry state. And I thought it was important for this General Assembly to go out and reiterate that as well.
Well, I'm really glad that you did. And, you mentioned the Attorney General. She did, in response to former Senator Linda Collins Smith's letter, Scott, asking if there was an actual penalty for carrying a weapon concealed without a concealed handgun. She said there is none. But then she urged, because Act 746 of 2013.
Let's face it, times are tough for the Arkansas General Assembly. They're all waiting for the spotlight exposing public corruption to end, so they won't be under so much scrutiny. And during this time, what if you're a legislator and you need money? What if you're slapped with a huge expense? What if your check for consultant services is late this month? Or maybe you just need extra cash now until payday. When that happens, you can't wait. Hi, I'm Bobby Blackmail for the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank, your trusted source to over 135 lenders to get you short-term cash fast. Use the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank today, and you can have up to $12,500 cash in your checking account tomorrow. Dried up bribes no longer coming from Medicaid entities? Handled. Extra cash until your hopeful acquittal? Done. And you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get extra cash. Just be an elected official and be comfortable with the status quo, and we'll connect you with a fellow legislator who is ready to loan. It's quick and easy. And don't worry if you can't make the payments, because the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank is designed to help you get through these tough economic times. There are other ways you can pay off your debt, like by voting the way the establishment wants, or by rewarding some with committee chairmanships. So forget about overdraft fees and the spirit of covetousness that sometimes overwhelms the best of lawmakers. Just remember, the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank for short-term cash between colleagues when you need it fast.
Some transactions have long-term consequences.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, here, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us on this Monday. Thanks for starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We wish the nurse anesthetist community the best of luck today on the House floor. I think they got good odds here. I mean, so far the House has been very resilient in terms of standing up to the chicken little sky is falling, predict. It's amazing what some people will go down to the floor and say about what will happen if you deregulate this particular profession. Healthcare profession, and they really. Of course, it's kind of like obvious. It's obvious that they're going to say, like people's lives are at risk because you're talking about healthcare. That's the cop out, in my opinion. You can always be like, people will die. I mean, that's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is saying right now with the Green New Deal. She's blaming the floods in Nebraska. It's terrible that our countrymen are going through what they're going through in Nebraska. But the Mark Pryor and the Obama administration tried to say the same thing back when those tornadoes devastated Mayflower and I think Valonia. This was several years ago. It was the tornadoes happened, and the federal government released a report suggesting that, if we drove less, consumed less fossil fuels, or, created less carbon, that those people's homes would still be there. I mean, to me, that's the ultimate assumption. The report didn't say that, but it's saying there'd be less radical weather events, if you were to have less carbon. And I don't know. That, to me, at some point you get into rain dance territory where, we would be, if you dance, it'll rain. I just don't understand how they can even make these types of predictions. But anyway, it's the obvious thing, right? It gets people's attention. Pain point politics. People will die. You decided to run a resolution in the Senate clarifying a circuit court decision. Tell us about that.
So I visited with Representative Brant Smith out of Jonesboro a few months ago, and I told him, I said, listen, if you have if you want to move forward with this resolution and you have trouble with a Senate sponsor, you call me and let me know, and I'll be more than happy to run it for you. So 2 or 3 weeks later, Brant calls me and asked me if I would be willing to run it in the Senate. I said, of course. Here's the thing, Paul. Rights are important. Exercising those rights are important because if you do not exercise your rights, you lose your rights. Not everybody in Arkansas is going to open carry. The vast majority are not. However, it is important for people to know that we are a constitutional carry state, which means you have the right to carry open or concealed without a permit. And there has been a lot of confusion over that. I mean, we have been an open carry state for a number of years now. The problem is that there's still, a lot of pockets of our state and a lot of folks, in law enforcement and other areas of government that don't understand that or realize that yet. So we need to educate people. And so last year there was an appeals court ruling. I believe it was Taft versus Arkansas. Taft?
Yeah, Taft, yeah.
Taft versus Arkansas. And what the appeals court ruled was that essentially they just clarified that indeed we are a constitutional carry state and you do have the right to carry openly or concealed without a permit. Now, this resolution is just showing that this General Assembly concurs with that ruling. We are in agreement. The governor has already come out and said we're an open carry state. The Attorney General has come out and said we're an open carry state. And I thought it was important for this General Assembly to go out and reiterate that as well.
Well, I'm really glad that you did. And, you mentioned the Attorney General. She did, in response to former Senator Linda Collins Smith's letter, Scott, asking if there was an actual penalty for carrying a weapon concealed without a concealed handgun. She said there is none. But then she urged, because Act 746 of 2013, people still are confused about it. Although this resolution that you just passed, Scott, it really helps with that confusion, makes it clear.
And it's sad, Paul, that people are still confused about it.
Yeah.
Because I've read it. I know you've read it. Everybody down here in Little Rapids has read it. I don't believe there's any confusion on anybody that I talk to's part as far as what it allows for.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Attorney General, Leslie Rutledge, she did say she encouraged you guys in the legislature in her last opinion on this. I think it's
to come back and clarify.
To clarify. And the title of the resolution is to clarify gun rights. And so
to clarify gun rights. I don't know how we could be more specific than that.
Yes. So
I was glad, it was a...
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, 870-275-9799. So the House votes down the appropriation budget for Arkansas Works Medicaid expansion on Friday, and the left, predictably, thankfully, is melting down about this. I mean, it's just, at least, I don't know. I just find it just encouraging that. Now, the thing is, though, we do have to remember that the argument here is being shifted into not wanting the program at all to, well, how do we fund it appropriately? You know what I'm saying? Now, I think the House of Representatives should be commended for voting down this budget. It's the most interesting thing that's happened all session in terms of, things not going the way the establishment wants, which very rarely ever happens down there with these big ticket items, at least. When we're talking about an $8 billion budget. in terms of the federal and state spending on Medicaid. That's what they're being asked to vote on less than 48 hours after a judge struck down the key Medicaid work requirement. I mean, it was preposterous. They rushed it through the Senate, passed it 40 minutes, mere minutes before the judge's decision came down, which means there's a leak somewhere. The judge, somebody leaked that judge's decision. Anyway, so I want to pull back this video up, but Joe, I'd like for you to click on the. We haven't heard Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan took to speak. Yeah, I would just click on Dan Sullivan's name, and let's listen to what Dan said yesterday or on Friday as to why we should vote down this appropriation. Listen.
Do next. How do we get together as a body and have a debate similar to what happened at the forming of our Constitution, when the founders got together over a big problem and they argued and they debated. Different people brought ideas to the table. They got mad at each other. Several of them probably went home and had something to drink. They prayed. They came back and argued some more and came up with a great idea. There is a mechanism to do that called the Committee of the Whole. And I've spoken to the Speaker about that. We don't have to do that today, but we can have a Committee of the Whole where we come up with an agenda, we come back prepared, and we sit here in front of the cameras, in front of the people, and have an open discussion about what the opportunities are, what the risks are, and where we go from here. And my recommendation, and would ask that you today vote no, that we talk about what a Committee of the Whole would look like and come back at a later date and pass this. I'm not saying we don't want to pass it. I think we need to pass this at some point, but we don't have to do it today. And that we come back and talk about what we as a body can do together. The other day in the Senate again, the comment was made that we shouldn't use the appropriation process to set policy. Well, folks, that's the only power you have. It's the only power you have is to get 26 or 27 of us together of a like mind and talk about what the appropriation looks like. We learned that the other day when one of our colleagues wanted to pass a bill or run a bill to help some of the poorest people in the state. And we decided as a group that we would vote no and come back and see if there were solutions. And that's all I would ask of you today is we vote no today. We figure out how we can come back as a body and have a debate. Thank you.
Again, that's State Representative Dan Sullivan. The bill, the appropriation, by the way, that's leadership. I just want you to know, he comes to the floor with an idea, and he's saying it's very reasonable. Again, they were being asked to vote, to make an $8 billion vote. Less than 48 hours after a federal judge struck down one of the key reasons you got any Republican support for this giant Medicaid welfare program at all. We're not talking about health care to the truly needy. We're talking about health care to people who are able to work, adults, many of whom don't work. That's what we're talking about. And that phrase right there, able-bodied, working-age adults with no dependents who choose not to work, is the very reason ASA decided to rename the program. Now, I want you to think about that. He renames the program Arkansas Works. That whole rebranding, getting rid of the toxicity of the private option, is what got some of these Republicans on board in the first place, because they didn't want to not support. It was ASA trying to give them a way to support something he knew they didn't support. So ASA says, you know what, I'll rebrand it, and you can vote for Arkansas Works now, not the private option. It's Arkansas Works. You can show your fealty to me, so I don't have to find you a primary challenger. That's what this is really about. So I don't have to find you a primary. I'll rename the. I'll give you this. I'll give you an out. Well, okay, Arkansas Works, right? The governor says 12,000 people have found employment because of his work requirement now. 12,000 people. And you need to be really impressed with that. I mean, I'm not impressed with that. I mean, that we're spending all this money for 12,000 people to get jobs that are not on the program now? That's not exactly the type of work requirement I think a lot of people were thinking. But you know what? that's beside the point. We're way past that, right? The bottom line is even that. Think about this. The state of Arkansas has forced 12,000 people to, into work who are on this program. And a federal judge says we can't even do that. That even that is wrong. Okay, all right. So now what? I mean, to me, in the past, I know there's more people on the program, but if you held the position that Medicaid expansion is unsustainable, by the way, Governor Asa Hutchinson himself has said in the past that without the work requirements, Medicaid is not sustainable. Is that still a true statement? Let's go to State Representative Grant Hodges from Friday. Here is his speech, and he just wants some questions answered. Listen to this.
That's what I'm doing. My issue really is that we're being asked to vote on a more than $8 billion Medicaid budget less than 48 hours after a court decision that has a pretty significant effect on the Medicaid budget. And I cannot support that. Last night, as I was kind of stewing about the fact that this bill was going to be run today with such short notice, I decided to go back and look at what was said when we ran the same appropriation a year and 2 years ago, just to see what we were told, because this is my fifth session, and those of you that have been around, they all sort of blur together, and you just kind of forget all the specifics. So I wanted to go back and hear what was said about this a year ago and 2 years ago. And also I know that almost a fourth of you weren't here a year and 2 years ago. And so for one thing, like I mentioned in my question to Chairman Gene, I went back and watched him present the bill 2 years ago, and he said in there that we can't sustain this budget as is if we don't do something. In addition, I went back and looked at what the governor had said, and I went through a lot of his press releases. And I want to talk about a few things he said last year when we ran this budget in the fiscal session. And the first one is from February in his State of the State address before the fiscal session started last year. He said, and I quote, "As for the future, I expect approval from Washington before the legislative session ends on our request to implement a work requirement for the Arkansas Works program. If you are able-bodied and of working age with no dependents, you should be working or in training. The only long-lasting solution to lowering the cost of Medicaid is to help more people earn their way off. The only long-lasting solution to lowering the cost of Medicaid is to help more people earn their way off." So my question is,
only is the operative phrase
if this is
there.
no longer a solution because we no longer have the work requirement, are there other solutions that we can consider before we vote for this appropriation? Because I know there's at least one representative who has a bill to help lower the cost of Medicaid,
Miller,
specifically for the expansion population that we're really all talking about here. Could we not discuss some of that before we vote on this bill?
Leadership says no.
The next statement was on March 6th, a few weeks later. It was a press release that said, "Governor Hutchinson issues statement in response to the passage of Senate Bill 30, the Division of Medical Services appropriation," same appropriation as we have here today. This was last year. Quote, "I'm very grateful for the senators that were able to support Arkansas Works and the DHS appropriation. Obviously, the work requirement was a significant factor in showing the reform that we're accomplishing, and I appreciate the Senate's leadership in passing this on the first vote. Obviously, the work requirement was a significant factor."
Got to have the work
A few days
requirement.
later, and this will be the last one, a press release titled "Turning Point for Healthcare in Arkansas." The governor said, "The work requirement is not intended as a punishment, but as a way for Arkansas to actively engage, for Arkansans to actively engage in their community and to enjoy the dignity that comes with earning a paycheck and providing for a family. The fact is, we would not have been able to sustain Medicaid without the type of reform included in the waiver. We needed the flexibility to best address the needs of Arkansas, and that is what this waiver allows. The fact is, we would not have been able to sustain Medicaid without the type of reform included in the waiver."
Uh-oh. Well.
Which, as of today, as we're voting on this bill, we do not have.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is that statement true? If it's true that we can't sustain Medicaid without this waiver, then aren't we being asked today to vote for an appropriation for an unsustainable Medicaid program?
Yes.
Seems to follow to me. So really, I'm going to end with a lot of questions that I came up last night as I watched what I was told over the last 2 years about this same appropriation. My first question was, why was this appropriation passed out of budget during a recess from our session on Tuesday? I talked to several members who didn't even realize that had happened, but this bill was passed out of joint budget on Tuesday afternoon. Why was it then passed out of the Senate with a minimum of 27 votes just minutes before the district court's decision was released on Wednesday? According to the legislature's website, that bill passed out at 3:36 p.m., and our AP reporter, Andrew DeMillo, tweeted at 4:03 p.m. that the work requirement was struck down.
Minutes.
So less than 30 minutes before we get the decision, the Senate passed the bill. Why was this appropriation then put before the House for a final vote less than 48 hours after the court's decision? I got text about this about 4 o'clock 2 days ago. It's less than 48 hours, and now we're being asked to make an $8 billion decision. Why is this appropriation not being amended at all now that the work requirement piece is out of it? This appropriation was filed when the work requirement was in effect, and it has not been amended since. Does the work requirement not affect the Medicaid budget? Either the work requirement has no effect, which Chairman Jean said it has about a $20 million effect by his calculation, or the appropriation bill is intentionally inflated for DHS. And I listened to the Senate debate, and Senator Teague, the Senate budget chairman, said that there's plenty of appropriation either way. And Chairman Jean said a similar thing today. So then that begs the question to me, what is the point of this appropriation at all if DHS can just do whatever they want anyway? Why do we even bother with the appropriation if DHS and the executive branch can just do whatever they want anyway? Does the governor still hold his prior positions that the work requirement is the only long-lasting solution for lowering the cost of Medicaid? That it was a significant factor in passing this appropriation last year, and that the Medicaid program is unsustainable without it? And lastly, since we currently don't know if this case will be appealed, because just to clarify, the federal government is the defendant in this case, not the state of Arkansas. So this is not Attorney General Leslie Rutledge's decision to appeal this case or not. That is a federal government decision, which, as we're being asked to vote on this bill today, we have no indication that it for sure will be appealed. What if the case isn't appealed? Can we at least wait to pass this appropriation until after we know that it will be appealed? If it is appealed, how long is that going to take to resolve? Could it take years? Is it going to go to the Supreme Court? What happens to Medicaid between now and then? I think the House deserves to have our questions answered, to be given adequate time to consider the ramifications of the court's decision and the path forward, and to be included as a co-equal in these decisions rather than being run over with an $8 billion decision in less than 48 hours. With that, I would appreciate a no vote on this appropriation.
That's State Representative Grant Hodges. And I'm going to take this a step further because to me it's the obvious place where you need to go. By the way, excellent speech, excellent questions by State Representative Grant Hodges, and way to have a long memory, way to go back and look about what you were told by the leadership. And that's kind of where I want to go here. Obviously, if they're trying to rush this budget through and they're ignoring their past statements, I can infer that they didn't believe those past statements. They're just saying them as window dressing to look conservative, but they really, really care about giving Blue Cross Blue Shield taxpayer money to the tune of $600 per person per month for 300,000 Arkansans. Now, I think now it's down to 240,000, but it's been as high as 330. There was never supposed to be more than 215,000 people. There are some people that don't want to admit that. They want to say, no, 250,000 is what the minimum was. No, it was 215. 215. So, can you trust the leadership? I mean, the answer is obviously no. When it comes to this program, you cannot trust the people who are in positions of power. I'm not going to assign this to Speaker Shepard, though. I will exclude Speaker Shepard out of this. He actually, I know he probably supports, I think he voted for the passage of the budget. as a sign of solidarity of just, hey, we need to get this over with, but I'm not necessarily going to lump him in there. But I'm just talking about, I'm really just talking about uncle and nephew. I mean, and a few others. Folks, it doesn't matter how terribly expensive this program is. See, the mainstream media, they are not in the business of holding the people who are the champions of this Medicaid expansion parade accountable for what they say in terms of cost, in terms of projections of how many people. Like, they don't care. They don't report that. I've never seen it. Maybe there's somewhere out there somebody reported in the same article with like a headline that says, government estimates fail, Medicaid expansion up, costing state this much more per, like, I've never seen that. Like, they don't seem to do that. They don't seem to hold these guys accountable based on what they tell the people something's going to cost. And we're talking about their money, taxpayer money. I find that so odd. Or there's not one mainstream media article about how Republicans in leadership campaign on being fiscal conservatives and yet increase the budget every single year and spend more money. There's not one mainstream media person in the Democrat Gazette that would point out the hypocrisy there. Just on the facts about what you said versus what you did. There's none of that happening. Perfect example, Senator Jim Hendren. Senator Jim Spendren is at the bottom of the Capitol in the before the renovated cafeteria. He tells a room full of conservatives that his bill will, end Medicaid expansion, and yet, he's sitting there telling them this. And then he goes to the Tea Party, says this is where it ends it, and it clearly didn't. It kept. I mean, we're still having the debate over the appropriation, so clearly it didn't end the program at this point. Can you so if you're going through emails and you're going through all of this, all these press releases, and you realize, wow, what was said back in the day wasn't true now, or at least it doesn't appear that they believe that now. What has changed? I mean, that's an honest question. I fully expect the House of Representatives to pass this appropriation at some point. But State Representative Sullivan's right. State Representative Hodges is right. This is all completely reasonable. They're asking for public comment. They're asking for public statements. They're asking to get answers to questions when it comes to spending taxpayer money. We should be, the whole state should be celebrating them right now for trying to have some sort of say, unlike the Senate that just rubber stamps whatever they're told to do because, well, we don't want to have this fight again. We've had this fight many times, and we don't need to be setting policy with the appropriations process because that's just not good. This is your constitutional responsibility. This is the system that we have, okay? You guys do not have power coming up here in a couple of days. Your constitutional power is gone. Think about that. And at the last minute, they ram through the appropriation, and then they ask you guys to vote on it. It's insulting. They don't have any respect for you. And so you should have given them a vote like you did. You did a great job. Arkansas House of Representatives, you guys that voted against this, you did a great job. You deserve answers to your questions. You deserve answers to your questions. And I would like to see them actually debate Josh Miller's bill to bring this whole thing to an end and eventually, and put it in a fee-for-service system. Fee-for-service. I think if you read the bill, though, you have to have another task force to do it. I don't know if I can handle another task force. I'm just going to be honest. I would, though, for a fee for. I mean, if it saves if it actually saves taxpayer money, not robbing the truly needy over in traditional Medicaid to pay for this nonsense. We got to take a break.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed roller lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
No major opposition in the Senate other than what you would expect, which was some liberal Democrats. But it's something that all Republicans are kind of on the same page on. We're all in agreement. And I think it's important that we go out and speak with one voice on that. Again, you cannot quantify how important, not just your right to bear arms, but any right that you have, and the importance of it, and the importance for people to be able to exercise it.
Yeah.
Because when people exercise their rights, they don't just benefit them, they collectively benefit all of us.
I completely agree with that. Senator Scott Flippo, it's always great to have you on, sir. I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you running that resolution. I don't appreciate that first vote we talked about.
But and I appreciate that. And Paul, I can tell you, you're not the only one, I can assure you.
Well, you have a good weekend, Scott.
Listen, you do the same. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. It's always great to have you on.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Continuing coverage of the 92nd General Assembly. Here's a piece, though, that maybe kind of out of bounds, you'd think, but everybody knows who Peter Schweitzer is in the conservative community. You know about his book, Clinton Cash. It exposed much of which may bring down many people around the Clintons eventually, especially with William Barr as the new Attorney General. It's a book that played a pivotal role in 2016. Well, he's got a new book out. Investigative book on government corruption that involves a series of accusations involving billions of dollars against some major political players, including former Vice President Joe Biden, according to James Barrett over at the Daily Wire. Secretary of State John Kerry, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell even. Over the last week, Schweitzer has spoken on Fox News, Sean Hannity's many times. It's called Secret Empires, How the American Political Class Hides Corruption and Enriches Family and Friends. I want to talk about this more later in the week. This is the new corruption, Sean. And essentially what he does, he lays out, folks, a situation where the Chinese government and other foreign governments enrich the children of these politicians, and then they don't have to report it. And how the Chinese specifically is targeting the kids and enriching the kids, and then they get these, sweetheart deals. And then you got this China lean. And I just think, how far does the talons of the Chinese go when it comes to, are they doing this with local officials, making people's kids